Good evening. If everybody would kindly sit down, I think we will start with the proceedings. We have a couple of preliminary speakers whom I will have asked to come to the podium right now, and then we will get right into the debate. One moment, please.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Portuguese Cultural Center. My name is Jorge Sousa, and I am currently the president of the board of directors of this great organization. We at the Portuguese Cultural Center are very proud and very honored to once again open this great facility to all of you and allow you the opportunity to listen to two candidates that are running to represent our community in the United States Congress. So I ask you to please, during this debate, give your two candidates your fullest attention. Without further ado, I'd like to ask you to join me in welcoming to the stage the News Times Managing Editor, Jean Dubel.
All I wanted to do was say a quick thank you to our partners, the Portuguese Cultural Center and the League of Women Voters, and say we're very pleased to be part of this, sponsoring this debate tonight. And my only other job is to introduce the debate coordinator for the League of Women Voters, Yara Burnett, who is going to be tonight's moderator. And thank you, and I hope everybody enjoys the debate and gets a lot out of it. Thank you.
Thank you all. At this time, may I ask everybody to please silence your devices, electronic devices, if you would, and thank you. I would like to add my welcome to everybody. It's wonderful to see practically all the seats filled. Who would have believed? We are looking forward to an informative debate tonight. We will be using the cumulative time format. In this format, each candidate, when speaking, is timed by his or her timer. At each cumulative time is kept. Whenever one candidate begins speaking, the stopwatch goes on. When he or she stops speaking, the stopwatch is clicked off, and the cumulative time will be shown on a large piece of paper to the candidates and to myself. This format allows the candidates to probe each other's answers, to rebut, to explore the subject in great length and width. There will be no opening statements, but there are 2-minute closing statements. The candidates have drawn lots for the order of precedence. Mr. Greenberg is going to speak first, and he will be the first one to give the closing statement at the end. The questions will come from a panel of journalists. The same question is addressed to each candidate before direct debate between candidates is invited. When the topic has been exhausted, once nobody has anything more to say, we will move on to another question, which then will be addressed first to the next candidate. Our panelists are Rob Reiser of the News Time, right there, Emanuela Leave of Tribuna, and Jillian Morrow of WLAD. We also have received several questions from the public. They were emailed to the News Time, and we will be asking them after probably 2 rounds of questions from the panelists. We respectfully request the audience to refrain from loud outbursts, but a round of applause at the end of the debate would be most welcome. As a moderator, as I said, I will keep track of the elapsed time and try to make sure it's just about equal. Now, may I introduce the candidates? Seated right next to me, to my right, is Mark Greenberg, the Republican challenger, and sitting next to him is Elizabeth Esty, the Democratic incumbent for the 5th Congressional seat. All right, without further ado, I will ask Ms. Morrow to ask the first question of Mr. Greenberg, knowing that both candidates can respond.
Okay, this question is about Metro North. It seems that it's been sort of left alone to its own devices until it hit crisis mode and could not be ignored. What can the government do to ensure a reliable, safe service on the commuter railroad?
First, let me thank the League of Women Voters for putting this debate on. It's very, very well attended. We appreciate the fact that you've come and become part of this debate and listening to both Congresswoman Esty and me. So I'd like to say that first. With regard to Metro North, I was a casualty of the bridge in East Norwalk that was stuck up about 3 months ago. So my campaign manager and I had to get in a car right away to drive down to Washington for meetings. So I have a personal experience about this happening. The infrastructure in the state is very, very important. We have to make sure that our infrastructure is taken care of. We have to make sure that our roads are working. We have to make sure that they're safe for the public. My understanding is that some of the funds that we take in from the gas tax are frankly diverted to other purposes, other budgetary purposes in the state of Connecticut, which I think is unfortunate. If we're going to be paying these taxes, I think that these taxes should go toward the infrastructure that it was intended. I would hope that we will rebuild some of these old structures, some of these old bridges, to make sure that they perform properly and that they're safe, so that we can once again recreate a gateway from New York to Boston, because Connecticut is very, very carefully located, beautifully located between Boston and New York. We have to make sure that our infrastructure is operating properly so that we can stay competitive. Thanks for the question.
Okay, Ms. Esty, you're next. Same question.
Well, thanks very much to the League of Women Voters, to all of you who came out tonight, and to the Portuguese Club for welcoming us here this evening, and to our panelists for the excellent questions. Metro North is a lifeline for much of our state. I lobbied very hard to get on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee in the U.S. Congress because I know how important this is for the state of Connecticut. When I was on the town council in Cheshire, it was one of the first issues that was raised by small businesses in a town like Cheshire, of like, we need a better transportation system. And so we're struggling along with the 1950s infrastructure system, and it's the 21st century. So Metro North needs to be able to be reliable, safe, and faster than it was in the 1940s. We are a great enough country that we can aspire to speed and safety. That's why, as a member of the Rail Subcommittee, I have held rail safety hearings. I'm a co-sponsor of a rail safety bill that will put additional funds in and ensure that we have positive train controls, which would have prevented the fatal accident that occurred last year. Ensure that we are shoring up and using technology well and in a smart way to keep our trains safer. Folks here in Danbury know how important it is to use the Danbury line as part of commuting into New York. It is absolutely vital to the future of the state, to the competitiveness of Connecticut, that we increase our investment. And it is a long-term investment that's needed. We should not wait until the bridge falls down or the train derails until we make the kind of long-term investments that built this country, that made it great. And that's why I'm going to continue working hard with the Secretary of Transportation. Was pleased that we were able to get a $14.4 million grant for Waterbury to deal with their transportation needs. And I know because I travel I-84, that portion that's being done on the other side of Waterbury needs to be extended from Waterbury all the way to Danbury to make it possible to move around this part of the state and this part of the district better too. And I'll continue fighting for that.
Okay, Mr. Greenberg, do you have anything to add to that?
Oh, no, other than that the East Norwalk Bridge is 150 years old. So we have to do something to improve our infrastructure to become competitive again and make sure that it's safe for our folks.
Okay, Ms. Morrow, did you want to have a follow-up question on this topic, or shall we move on?
We can move on.
Okay. Question number 2 will be posed by Ms. Leaf, and it will go to Ms. Esty first.
As a journalist, I've written countless stories on many aspects of the immigration system in the United States. As a naturalized American citizen, I have gone through the system myself, and I know by experience how broken it is. As a candidate or as our incumbent, What is your understanding of the issues of the current immigration system? What makes it broken? And where do you stand on immigration reform?
Well, thank you so much for that question. And I, too, believe that the current system is badly broken. And I don't think there's really anybody at any point across the political spectrum who doesn't agree on that. The issue is, what do we do about it? Now, I will tell you, I hear from folks all over this district. I hear from the growers in Cheshire. I hear from the farmers in the northwest corner. I hear from the dreamers, from Carolina and from Camilla here in Danbury, proud products of the Danbury High School, who have become national leaders advocating for the need for us to fix immigration. It takes too long. The H-1B visa process is too restrictive. And the bottom line is, we have 11 million people living undocumented in this country, semi-integrated into our economy. And the single most important thing we could do to create jobs in this country, and this we have been told over and over again, I'll tell you, in the year and a half that I've been in Congress, by all these business leaders, big and small companies coming in and pleading with us, Democrats and Republicans, please fix immigration. This will create jobs, and that's why I'm a co-sponsor of H.R. 15. It's the Comprehensive Immigration Reform Bill in the House of Representatives, the companion to what was passed in the Senate a year and a half ago. John Boehner, the Speaker of the House, needs to allow a vote on this in the U.S. House of Representatives. It would pass if we had a vote. It has an earned path to citizenship. It deals with security at the borders. It unifies families and ensures that people pay taxes and get in line. But folks, we need to fix the system. And right now, we are losing ground. We are losing the energy and innovation of Americans, and we're losing opportunities to create jobs. And this is something that needs to be a bipartisan solution, which they've already done in the Senate, and we should be doing in the House.
All right, Mr. Greenberg, I'm sure you have something to say about that.
Well, yeah, what I have to say is this is the greatest country on earth. We are the greatest country on earth partially because we've opened up our borders legally to folks from other countries. My father's here in the front, and his dad, Irving, my grandfather, came from Russia when Irving was 2 years old. And on the other side of the family, they came from what was Austria-Hungary in the 1860s, 1870s. We are a country of immigrants. We're great because of that. We have to, however, make sure that we streamline the process so that folks who want to come into this country can come in without much delay legally. Now, we have to also make sure that our borders are secured for many reasons. We have to make sure that diseases don't find their way over our borders. We're dealing with this right now. We have to make sure that the folks who are trying to become legal immigrants see that we're not making it easier for other people, illegal immigrants, to buck the system, because we are a country of laws. We need to abide by the laws. But we have to make it easier for folks who want to come to this, the greatest country on earth, to come in to this country and assimilate and become part of this great country.
Okay, anybody else? Ms. Leaf, would you like to probe further into this, or?
Yes, I do have a follow-up for Mr. Greenberg. Mr. Greenberg, so would you support a immigration reform package that would include a path to citizenship to the 11 million documented immigrants in the United States?
Well, we first have to change laws so that we could get legal immigrants, those folks who are online now, into the country the proper way. I would be willing, once we secure the borders, to start looking at getting these folks, these 11 million people, on the line after those folks who are on the line already get citizenship.
Ms. Esty, do you want to add anything to this?
Well, I think this is an example of a very clear difference of views between us, and it's something that people should understand. The time period that Mr. Greenberg is talking about to allow the full pipeline to go through of people in line now and to secure the borders, some people, the proposals they're calling for, if you were waiting to start any movement forward, would be a matter of years. The system is broken. We need job growth in this country. This is the single best thing we could do. And I will tell you, we hear from high-tech companies as well, and from our major research universities. They need to allow these great graduates who come from around the world to study right here in Connecticut. We want them to stay and build their companies. They can't do that right now. This is a system that needs to be fixed for all Americans, as well as for the 11 million who are living and working here and are not documented.
Okay, anything else? Mr. Greenberg, you have an opportunity to add to it? Okay, very good. Next question will be posed to Mr. Greenberg by Mr. Reiser.
Can everybody hear me okay? First, I'd like to acknowledge the fact that, you know, with Elizabeth's education and background, there's a variety of rewarding career paths that she could follow that don't involve public disclosure of her income and spending or media scrutiny of her job performance. And I'd also like to acknowledge the fact that Mark, with his business background and his entrepreneurial success, has a variety of appealing career paths that do not involve knocking on doors of strangers, looking for votes every 2 years, or justifying his political positions regardless of whether the questioner is a friend or a foe. So these expressions of accountability and transparencies are ones that we expect from our elected leaders, but they're ones that we never take for granted. So we want to quickly recognize the willingness to put others first in the service of the common good, because that's the foundation of good government. We thank you for being here tonight in that spirit. The first question I have deals with what each of you are doing specifically to make sure that the campaign you run leaves the district in a better place than you found it when you started running. I'll be a little bit more specific. When you speak to constituents, when your campaigns launch ads, when you share your vision about solving our biggest problems, how specifically are you contributing to a conversation about solutions that are going to endure regardless of whether you win or lose the race?
Okay, do you need the question repeated, Mr.
Well,
Greenberg?
it's a long question, but I think I understand it.
Okay.
We have run in this campaign and prior to campaigns, which were unsuccessful for me, what I believe to be a very positive campaign. We try to deal with the issues that are important to the folks of the 5th District and to the citizens of Connecticut and to the people in this country in general. We try not to be negative. We try to offer solutions as opposed to simply criticizing what's going on now. I've said very, very many times that I don't want to be elected if I'm going to be elected the wrong way. I don't want to be elected if I'm going to be elected in a way that I will not be able to look at myself in the mirror in the night and be proud of what I've done. I only want to be elected if the people of the district believe in my philosophy, believe in my morals, believe in the greatness of this country. I believe, for instance, that we should have term limits. I've called for that for 5 years. I happen to think we should have term limits of 2 terms, no more than 4 years, because I don't think that we should run for re-election more than once. I think that we've had congressmen and women who are out for themselves more than the people. I think that once they get elected, the next day after they get elected, they're busy making phone calls, raising money, thanking the PACs that have gotten them there, as opposed to sitting in front of the other Democratic or Republican congressmen to come to an agreement on how we can make this country great again and better again. So I am strongly for term limits. I'm strongly for having people who care about the people they're representing going to Congress about, instead of those people caring more about themselves and their own career. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Esty?
Well, I got started on the path to Congress about 9 years ago when my daughter, Sarah, 15 years old, challenged me when I was making less than flattering comments about local officials and their decision-making. And she looked at me and she said, "You know what, Mom? If you see a problem you can fix it yourself. That's what you told us." And that is what American democracy is about. It is about ordinary citizens, PTA moms and dads, business owners, immigrants, running for office, trying to make sure that this precious thing, American democracy, works better. And I am a strong believer in that. That is why in 2005 I ran for elected office for the town council. And I'll tell you, you have to be extremely accountability. If you want to talk about transparency and accountability, vote on your neighbor's property tax and they'll tell you exactly what they think about your decision making. I wish everybody in Congress had served in local office in Connecticut, because it is an extreme form of accountability that I think is really important and valuable. And those experiences, having served in local office and made those tough budget decisions, but it is also about investing and believing in this country. And elections are about choices. And in order to have choices, people need to know where we stand, they need to know our values, they need to know our character, and they need to know what we support. I've lost an election over a principled vote, I don't think you should run for office if there's nothing you'd lose your election over. And I am concerned on an issue that came up last month involving John Rowland and my opponent Mark Greenberg and 2 previous campaigns. And I don't think those questions have been asked. And the reason I'm raising that is not to be negative, but I do believe character matters. When you're an elected official, you're elected to represent 750,000 Americans, fellow members of Connecticut. And our values do matter in that. And for someone who would describe themselves as essentially gutless and unwilling to turn down a politically corrupt offer, unable to report that to federal authorities, I think goes to the heart of a question about whether you'll stand up, whether an elected official will stand up and do the right thing, even if it's political peril for themselves, even if they might lose the election. And I deeply believe that, and I've lived that.
Mr. Greenberg?
Yeah, I'm going to try repeating, and then I want to try to keep this campaign positive. I want to discuss.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's save the clapping till the very end, if you don't mind. Thank you. Mr. Greenberg, continue.
I believe in having principles means that you do not air a commercial which the Hartford Courant has said as follows, and I'm quoting the Hartford Courant, and I'm talking about Social Security. Instead, all of Greenberg's words have been presented in dramatically misleading fashion in support of an overall claim that Greenberg wants to end Social Security's guarantee. That is unsubstantiated by the facts. Accordingly, we rate this ad false. Let me just say on this, I believe in Social Security benefits for all seniors. I believe that the system should give back to those people who put in. I believe we should have a discussion about it. It is patently clear that if we do nothing about it, this system will fail. Yes, I said this system will fail. I have the guts to say that to you people and to Congresswoman Esty. Let's have a discussion about it. Let's not bury our heads in the sand. Let's not kick it down the road. Let's discuss it. Let's be smart enough to know that issues that we have need to be corrected. That is leadership.
Okay, do we, Mr. Reiser, did you have a follow-up question, or?
No, that's fine. Let's go to the next
Okay,
question,
anything
please.
more to add on that?
No,
Okay, then we will go once again to Ms. Morrow, who will ask the next question of Ms. Esty.
The cost of a higher education is continuing to climb and becoming cost prohibitive to many. What can the federal government do to address tuition hikes and/or student loan costs?
All right.
Well, it's an extremely important question. And as a mother of a 25, 22-year-old, and 19-year-old, I'm well aware of just how difficult that is for many families. When I was all over the district asking people what was going on in their lives, finding out what their top concerns were this summer, one of the top 3 issues was education and the affordability of higher education. In this country, we believe strongly that education is the key to good jobs, to a middle-class life. We tell our kids, work hard, study at school, go on and get an advanced degree, and you'll have a great job. But that's getting out of reach for too many American families. It's one of the reasons I worked so hard summer before last, because unfortunately, the Tea Party allowed interest rates to double on student loans. That was costing thousands of dollars for folks in Connecticut. We were able to undo that and drop the interest rates in half. I'm a co-sponsor of a bill that would allow private industry student loans to be renegotiated, to be at a lower rate, to, again, we want to encourage people to stay in school. We want to encourage our young people to finish their degrees and then to raise their families here. And if it becomes out of reach, that's a problem for all of us. And frankly, I think it's important that we understand there's a linkage too. We're going to see problems in the housing market because right now, young people are so burdened by student loans, they're not buying houses. And that's going to have an impact across the construction industry. It's going to have an impact around the state. We're beginning to see it already. So again, this needs to be a bipartisan solution, working together to find ways to keep those rates lower and to work with our universities to bring those tuitions down.
Okay, Mr. Greenberg, your response?
Yeah,
You're a little behind on the time, so feel free to expand.
We have a great aerospace industry in this state. We always talk about companies leaving the state, but I'm going to talk tonight about the fact that we have tremendous machinists, technicians, skilled workers in companies like Admiral in New Britain that just won a large contract with Pratt & Whitney. I'm going to say something which may be a little bit controversial. I not think that every person should go to liberal arts school. I think perhaps we should have some of our young people going to vocational school, going to learn the skills that Admiral Corp need in their people. Admiral Corp needs people to work in New Britain at the cleanest possible manufacturing facility that I've seen. And I've seen a lot of manufacturing facilities. A lot of them are clean. We have an opportunity in this state to bring back manufacturing, to make these aerospace parts, these Pratt & Whitney engines, the greatest in the country, in the world. So maybe what we should do is encourage some folks, some young kids, some young adults, to go to vocational schools to fill these jobs. These jobs are offering $25 per hour starting out. These employers are willing to pay for the education at these vocational schools for these folks. So maybe we should change our outlook again. Let's become a manufacturing giant again in Connecticut. Now, in terms of the student rate, interest rates, we're charging 6.5% to 7% for those loans. I think that's crazy, frankly, because the government borrows at a much lower rate. I think that the government should reduce those rates. I think they should. They have to make the burden of these loans for these people, these young children coming out of school, a little easier. And by the way, young people are not coming back to Connecticut. I think 8 or 9 out of 10 young people graduating are not coming back to Connecticut or leaving Connecticut to find jobs elsewhere. Let's work on making this state great again. I like to say that from 1991 to 2014, we've gone from first to worst. Let's make the next 20 years from worst to first again, and let's do it by making sure that we deal with the skills that we have, the tremendous labor force that has skills that unfortunately are growing older among our population. Let's let younger people learn these skills so we can be great again in this state.
Thank you. Anything more to add on this issue? Please do. Yes.
I'm a third-generation manufacturer. My father and grandfather were civil engineers and started a little manufacturing company that's been going for 64 years, doing zinc die casting. They've fought off competition from Mexico, from Korea, now China. Manufacturing built this country. It built this state. But it shouldn't just be a part of our past. It is a part of our future. That's why I've been working so hard in a bipartisan way, and I will assure you there's a lot of bipartisan support in Congress for these initiatives. Just 2 weeks ago, I introduced a bill with a Republican from the Rochester area in New York for manufacturing universities to support programs at places like UConn and our engineering school, to have our best and brightest engineers go into manufacturing right here in America. That's why I worked so hard to help get the $1.7 million grant for Naugatuck Valley Community College, which has a great program in manufacturing, both in Waterbury and in Danbury. And that federal grant is going to be going to work for our children and for retrained workers to have the skill sets we need to be competitive in the 21st century. We need to make things in America. There's innovation that comes from making things, and I know that, we all know that, but we need to stand up for and level the playing field for American workers, and we need to be working on things like STEM education, that science, technology, engineering, and math, which I've made a focal point of my efforts on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee. We'll never be able to have middle-class jobs again if we aren't ensuring that every child in this state has terrific technical skills. Those are the high-paid jobs. Those are the jobs we want, and they can't get them if they don't have those skills, and that's why we need to work on them with our technical high schools, our community colleges, and for those who wish to, on to advanced degrees. We need all of it, and it should all be world-class.
Okay, Mr. Greenberg, anything more to add?
No, thank you.
No, not at all. All right. The next question goes to you from Ms. Leaf.
Thank you. ISIL, the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, announced recently that it will seek to impose Sharia law across the world. Driven by an ideology based on brutality and extremism, ISIL's steady growth threatens us all. In your opinion, how should the United States deal not only with deterring the brutal violence that ISIL spreads, but also the proliferation of its ideology?
That's for me?
Yes.
Yeah. 2 years ago, I was on a radio interview, and I warned of these folks. They call themselves ISIL, ISIS, ICE, whatever you call them, radical fundamentalist Islamists who are out to kill us. Let's be very clear about that. Their ideology has determined that essentially anybody who doesn't think the way they do needs to be taken over, die, essentially. I warned about it, and I was ridiculed for warning about that. I think I was ahead of my time, frankly, in terms of that. These people are out to kill us. They've said that they want to raise the flag on the White House. I think to a large extent that we're dealing with a problem that shouldn't have been the problem had we acted properly 2 years ago, had we not created a vacuum by evacuating out of Iraq, which we did, and announcing the time that we'd be evacuating. Nature abhors a vacuum, and ISIS moved into that vacuum. Now, what we have to do is we have to stop these people. We have to stop them through whatever means are possible. I've agreed that the raids are good, the airstrikes, but as we know by history, when Nazi Germany was attacking Great Britain, airstrikes alone did not allow them to win. Britain kept on being strong. So I have my doubts as to whether airstrikes alone will work. Secondly, we should try to arm those people in the way of the harm of these people in Syria, Iraq, and try to make them save their own country because they're there. Now, a bulwark to that will be Israel. Israel will not allow this to occur, to go beyond their borders. But we have to make sure that we look upon this as essentially an attack, an eventual attack on this country. 9/11 was an attack on this country. 9/11 spurred us to action. So we have to make sure that we try to prevent that in advance, that we try to prevent it from happening. And we have to do whatever we can to prevent that from happening. We also have to secure our borders, because right now our borders are porous. So these folks could be crossing over the border and developing their own terrorist networks right now in this country as we speak.
All right, Ms. Esty, your response?
ISIS poses a national security threat to America, and it poses a threat of chaos to the world. I am supportive of the President's current policies for airstrikes in both Iraq and Syria, because we do need to degrade the military capability of ISIS. But let me also be clear. I do not support the arming and the training of Syrian moderates. I voted against that request from the President. And I did so because our experience has not been good with those efforts. There were many classified briefings and a lot of discussion about who are these Syrian moderates? Are there any left? Are there actual aims to help support putting down ISIS, or is there aim to overthrow Assad? We are a country that has endured 13 years of war, of bloodshed, of treasure in Iraq and in the region. I have a niece who served in Kabul and thank God came back safe a year and a half ago. But I am very wary of looking at putting young American men and women back in harm's way unless we have a clearly achievable military objective. I think the U.S. Congress needs to debate and vote on a new authorization for the use of military force. The Constitution empowers Congress and Congress alone to declare war. And it is unfair to our troops for this president or any president to commit combat troops to war without the voice of the American people, without your voice. It is your voice, and that is why Congress alone is supposed to debate and vote on these things. And I will say, for 40 or 50 years, Congress has been not exercising its constitutional responsibilities here, and it needs to. And I will continue to argue that we should have it. And this is a profoundly important decision that should be made with your voices at that table.
Okay,
I will leave it there for now. I suspect there's more.
Mr. Greenberg, feel free to expand.
I would, frankly, because, frankly, in the last 2 years, it was a Democratic administration, and it was Barack Obama, Harry Reid, Nancy Pelosi, and other members of Congress that allowed this to happen. We should have not allowed this to come to this point in time. Now we're in a position of fixing what that administration failed at.
Anything else on this topic? Ms. Leaf, did you want any
I do have
question?
one follow-up question that I would love for both candidates to answer. Both of you have replied with aspects with deterring the violence with the violence, but my question really wants to deal with how do you deal with an ideology that as soon as you kill a member from ISIS, they already have 15 children ready to take up that gun? So as a leader, how do you combat an ideology, not so much the violence?
Let's start with Mr. Greenberg.
Yes, for Mr. Greenberg.
That's an incredibly great question, and I'm going to answer it in a fashion that some people here may not want to hear. We are in this country reproducing at a rate of 1.6 per couple. We need 2.2, 2.3 to sustain. Some of those folks that are out to kill us are reproducing at a rate of 5 or 6 to 1. And it doesn't seem that we can do anything, in my opinion, to change their ideology. I wish we could get them to our table and say, we all got to love each other. Let's love each other. But I don't think that's possible, frankly. So I think that their deeply rooted ideology prevents them, in many ways, from being peaceful with us.
Okay, Ms. Esty, do you have a response?
I do. I take a very different perspective on this. I think we need the countries in the region to step up, because you can't have the kind of freedom that we have in this country that we aspire for other people around the world without rule of law, without respect for religious differences. Those are essential elements, and those cannot be imposed by American military might, strong as our might is militarily. It cannot impose that on other countries. But what we can do is we can provide support, and we can provide support for those groups within these countries, and to encourage allies and partners in the region to model that respectful behavior, which could foster and allow over time those countries to create the sort of societies that would have opportunity for young people, particularly for young men, that would share in those opportunities and not make this way of violence so attractive. So again, there are limits to our military power, but I have great faith in the aspiration of all people towards dignity and freedom, and we should be working to foster that. But be realistic about what we can do from here, and about the risks to us of putting our people in harm's way in a chaotic part of the world.
Mr. Greenberg, I think you have something else to say.
I do.
Please do. That's the idea.
Congresswoman Esty, as you know, I identify myself as Jewish. So I have a particular understanding about Israel, and I have read the Hamas Charter. And that Hamas Charter says that we will kill every Jew. And they have not changed that charter. So it seems to me in that region we have to have Hamas, the Gazans, to revoke this charter before we really talk to them about being good neighbors.
All right. Is there anything more on that topic, or?
Well, if we're discussing Israel, I'll certainly turn to that at this time. I'm a very strong supporter of Israel, have worked extensively on these issues. Every country has a right to defend itself, and no country and no people should be using human shields. It's wrong, and Hamas has done that and brought trouble on itself for engaging in behavior which should be condemned by the international community. And Hamas's charter indeed does not recognize the right of Israel, and that is not to be supported. One of the concerns I have in our present debate as a country is that we are taking our eyes off of Iran. Iran, a nuclear weaponed Iran, is a danger to the United States, is a danger to Israel, and is a danger to world security. And with the current discussion and focus on Syria and Iraq, I am deeply concerned that we are not discussing what we should be, which is the fact that Iran is not complying with the timetable they agreed upon. And I have raised this repeatedly and will continue to do so. It is a dangerous world out there. And we need to use our power wisely. And we need to be attentive to all the different forms of what American security really means. And Iran is another one that we have to deal with and hold them accountable.
Mr. Greenberg, since we expanded the question, do you have other things to say? This is your forum.
Yeah, I agree completely with the Congresswoman regarding Iran. It's a very dangerous country, so we're in full agreement on that.
Okay, so we're ready to move on. Let's see. Mr. Reiser, you have a question for Ms. Esty?
Yes, please. Thank you. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. told a crowd not long ago here in Danbury that there's enough sun and wind power in the United States to power the United States completely and reduce the problems associated with coal, oil, nuclear energy if we would only invest in updating our national grid the same way we invested in our national highway system, and that the cost of energy would subsequently drop and efficiency would increase, similar to what we have seen happen to information on the internet. What are your plans to promote clean energies?
Well, my very first bill that I introduced in Congress was a clean energy bill. It's been signed by the President of the United States for the town of Collinsville to allow them to repurpose a 100-year-old dam and to produce clean power right here and power 1,500 homes. And I think we need to be creative. Some of that is repurposing, and for us in Connecticut, frankly, that water power, I think, can be part of reducing our reliance on the grid, and that is going to be important. This is an issue as a member of the Science Committee. We spent a lot of time on the Research and Technology Subcommittee. I think we need to be looking at lots of different options, certainly over the short term. Efficiency plays an important role, and one of those ways of doing that is the grid. That is not the only way of doing it, though. I think it would be inaccurate. I don't quite agree with his optimistic assessment that the national grid will solve all those problems. Clearly, natural gas is going to be a bridge fuel. One of the reasons we are seeing a renaissance of American manufacturing is because our energy prices are coming down. And prices in China are going up, prices in Germany are going up. And so we need to understand that our energy policies are actually intimately related to our economy. And so again, I want a clean energy future. Part of that is basic R&D, which I'm advocating for strongly. But we also need to be wary about the government picking particular winners and losers. I think it's better to set standards for efficiency, better to set standards for meeting certain targets, and then let the market do its work to achieve that.
Okay, Mr. Greenberg.
Yeah, first, I would like to commend Congresswoman Esty's husband, Dan Esty, who was the commissioner of DEEP for a couple of years, in promoting clean energy, among which is solar. I think he did a great job. And by the way, I took advantage of a program that he initiated, which relates to solar energy. And I installed a complete solar grid on one of my properties in Middletown through this terrific plan that Dan Esty engineered. And it's been working great. I've been on the grid for about 7 months. We're saving lots of money, lots of hydrocarbons in using the sun in this farm that we've created. So I want to commend him for that. It's a great program. I would have a question, though, for Congresswoman Esty with regard to why she would have voted no on House Bill 4899, which is entitled Lowering Gasoline Prices to Fuel an America That Works. So if she could take some time to discuss that, I'd be appreciative.
All right. Do you wish to discuss it?
I can't. I know there are many wonderful sounding bills in Congress, and a lot of them have provisions in them that are very wrong for our state. That you will not find a bill in Congress that doesn't have a lovely sounding title. You will not find that. But I do believe, and I have to say there is a vigorous disagreement within the U.S. House of Representatives, as there is in the country, about how much emphasis we place on hydrocarbons, which is to say on petroleum, and on natural gas. And the mix that was in that bill was not one that I think is right for the state for exactly many of the reasons you just stated. We've made a bold investment in the state, and we are innovating and licensing technologies to the rest of the world. I think Connecticut's future is in innovation, in efficiency, and in developing the technologies that, in fact, the rest of the world wants and needs, and doubling down on our dependence on gasoline is not wise for us as a state, frankly, for our own self-interest, to say nothing of for the environment.
Okay, Mr. Greenberg, is there anything further to add to that? You can feel free to expand.
Well, yeah, basically this bill related to drilling off the continental shelf, which if we would issue more permits and we would drill off the continental shelf, then we would be able to be that much closer to energy independence. I believe we have to be energy independent. I believe this is important for many reasons. The more energy that we could take out of the shelf, the more energy that we could take out of the Bakken Formation and the new discovery in eastern Pennsylvania, the less reliant we'll be on the Middle East. And the less we would have to send our young people over to the Middle East to fight for those oil wells, which happened, as you know, on many occasions. So frankly, I'm for energy independence. I'm for the Keystone pipeline. We know, for instance, that the Trans-Alaska pipeline has performed flawlessly without environmental impact. Why don't we build Keystone? We'll create jobs by building Keystone. Why don't we drill off the continental shelf? We'll create jobs by doing so. We'll increase our supply, thus reduce the cost to consumers as well, which reduces inflation. You know, this is a win-win-win. I would love to have a commitment by Congresswoman Esty for an all-of-the-above energy policy. Nuclear, too. Why have we not built a nuclear plant in 40 years? I think we should look into this again. We have to become energy independent.
If I may?
More on energy? Yes.
Yes, please. I think energy independence, much bandied about, is not actually the right concept. Oil is an international commodity. If we pump more of it, that will reduce the price over the whole world, not in America, over the whole world. So the real idea here is energy security. I'm part of a bipartisan group called No Labels. I'm on the energy working group in that, and we are working hard at what should that all-of-the-above strategy look like. And it should be one about long-term moving us to energy security, which is not going to be doubling down on petroleum, because in fact, petroleum is essential for certain kinds of products we can only use oil for. So we need to be moving our transportation infrastructure onto a different sort of fuel. And that's going to make sense for us long term. So it's not as simple as destroying the environment by drilling off the coast of Alaska. We can and we should preserve the environment, should be responsible about the enormous aquifer that the XL pipeline would go over, and be safe about all the farmlands that cross. Be very smart and very careful about what we do. Absolutely, we should have all of the above, but it needs to be thoughtful, it needs to respect the environment, and we should not be rash and hasty just to create a bunch of jobs in the short term if in the long term we're harming our environment and we're endangering the planet with adding more hydrocarbons that we don't need to do.
Okay, Mr. Greenberg, is there anything further? You're flipping through your notes.
Well, yeah, no,
Feel free.
I was going to say that I think we have methodologies now to preserve the environment and not harm the environment in the process of achieving independence. All life comes to a choice. And if you can make the choice to do an all-the-above energy policy and drill, and there's a 99.7% chance, a 99.8% chance that you're not going to harm the environment, but you're going to be helping 330 million people in this country, I think you perhaps make that decision to do that. So, again, my feeling is that we have to move toward energy independence. We have to be sensitive about the environment, but let's look at the facts and try to move that way.
Okay. Mr. Reiser, did you have a follow-up on that? Anybody? Actually, I was going to, right now we've had a round of 2 questions per one of our media people. I was going to introduce now some of the questions from the voters who came in to the Times, News Times, and then we'll go back to you. We have plenty of time. This question goes to Mr. Greenberg, and the voter asks, what can be done to reduce waste, fraud, and duplication in federal programs? Or how can we provide better oversight and control over federal spending?
That's a loaded question.
It is.
Yeah. I've called for the elimination of the Department of Energy, for instance, because the Department of Energy in 1976 was guaranteeing energy independence in 25 years, and that certainly didn't happen. There is a lot of waste in the government. For instance, I think food stamps is up to 47 million participants, and up from 25 million participants. I think that a lot of those folks don't need food stamps, for instance. A lot of those folks are using expensive Adidas or have cell phones. There is a lot of waste in the government. I've said year after year that the government is big, bad, and broken, frankly. The 3 Bs, that we have to rein in spending. We have to be careful about how we spend our dollars. We have to reduce fraud. That question could be answered probably in 2 weeks, you know, with details and other facts. But we have to do everything that we can to try to streamline the government. And mostly what that means in many respects is to devolve to the states, pursuant to the 10th Amendment, give back to the states a lot of the powers that the federal government now have. For instance, Common Cause. To me, Common Cause is something I'm against. I think that the best teachers, for instance, are the parents. The second best teachers are the teachers. The worst teachers and the worst organization to dictate standards is the federal government, because I think our country is so vast that it's not fair for the federal government to place standards upon all 50 states. So my feeling is you have to be very careful, you have to be very efficient, you have to try to give back to the states control over some of the spending.
Okay, Ms. Esty.
Thank you. Well, certainly the fiscal responsibility that you have at the local level and as a state representative, and I see my former colleague Arthur O'Neill here today, and it's challenging. It's challenging to ensure that we're providing services and we're doing it in the most cost-effective way with your tax dollars. And there are ways we can do that. Frankly, we've seen that there's been abuse in the Medicare system, and there have been efforts undertaken over the last couple of years to really try to root that out, to reject claims that look not very substantiated. And there's been pushback on Congress on this, but we need to do that because your tax dollars matter. I've worked on the Transportation Committee, actually worked with the chairman of the Transportation Committee, Bill Schuster, on a bill that would get rid of a bunch of government reports that used to be done on paper, nobody reads them on paper, to try to find these projects, these study projects, these written reports, put everything online, make it accessible, spend your dollars better. We should learn from experience. Not everything that was tried by Senator so-and-so or Representative so-and-so makes sense anymore. We have too many jobs programs. They should be consolidated so that the best ones are working, and that's what we ought to support. So I'm pretty practical when it comes to things like this. I want to stretch your tax dollars, and we should try things, and then we just stop doing the ones that don't work well. And I do want to flag something that came up in the last year around the Defense Department. There have been cost overruns in a number of the programs. It's made a lot of press. An important program, the F-35, this is actually something that is very important for national security for America, but also very important to the economy of the state of Connecticut. Employs thousands of people. But it's turned out there have been a lot of cost overruns, which is to say spending more money than the contract agreed to. Well, that's your tax dollars. So we were able to get a change in those contracts. So forward going, the contractors, not the taxpayers, are going to have to share in those overruns. So there are a lot of things we can do. The Defense Department is one of those areas. We need to be tougher. We need to require more accountability and make sure your tax dollars are serving the purposes they're supposed to.
Okay, Mr. Greenberg, you'd like to...
There is a bill called H.R. 1872. It's called the Budget Accounting and Transparency Act, which was trying to bring through a transparency of budgeting and how we spend our money. Unfortunately, Congresswoman Esty, you voted against it, but you had good company because all of your colleagues did.
Okay. Do you have a position? The F-35 came from one of the questions submitted by the public. Do you have a feeling on continued funding of the F-35?
For me?
Yes. Yes. That was another question that came up from one of the voters, whether you would support continued funding of the F-35 plane.
Yeah, the answer...
Were you in Congress?
Yeah. In these dangerous times, it's very, very foolhardy to cut back funding on defense. I think that's just common sense at this point in time. We have to be diligent about our capability of leading this world, being a major leader. We have been for years, and if we continue to cut back on our funding on important missile systems and airplanes, which are the best in the world, I think we could give up an advantage that we have. So I would be very, very leery about reducing spending in the military, especially now, and on that plane.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Esty, do you wish to comment on that, or do you think you've covered it?
I think I mostly covered it. Yes, I believe we should have the F-35. It's important to our economy, but we do need to stay on top of these issues about cost overruns. We have many suppliers here in the state of Connecticut. These are great jobs. They're important. It's important for our national security. But whether it's this program or any other, your tax dollars need to be spent well, and we can't allow companies to rip off the American taxpayer, whether it's in defense or any other field. So we need to hold them accountable.
Okay, I think we'll go back to our panel, and we'll start with Ms. Morrow. And the question should actually go, according to my notes, first to Ms. Esty, if you would.
Okay. There's been a push for universal background checks. It's a two-part question. Where do you stand on that issue? And are there other firearm regulations you believe are needed given recent violent events?
I'm a strong supporter of universal background checks because I know that they work. And I want to say a shout out to the friends from Newtown who came here tonight. You know, sometimes when you run for office, which I ran, expecting and hoping that I would be working on issues of the economy and education, I have been working on those issues. And I could never have imagined the horror that was visited upon the neighboring community of Newtown. And the eyes of the nation and the prayers of the nation are with this community and with this state, with the horrible carnage that we've seen. And I think we have a special responsibility. I believe the member of Congress for the 5th District has a special responsibility to stand up and do what's right. The NRA actually used to support universal background checks. They no longer do, which is too bad. Universal background checks work. Now, somewhere between 17 and 40% of all commercial sales of guns are done outside of the background check system. And that's wrong, and it's dangerous. And it's dangerous not just for Newtown, but it's dangerous in our cities every single day where most of the flow of illegal guns happens. We need background checks to ensure that felons, domestic violence abusers, and the dangerously mentally ill do not have access to guns. That's the law, and it is so full of loopholes right now that you could drive a Mack truck through it. We should also prohibit, as a matter of federal law, straw purchasing, which is one person buying for another. And we should also prohibit the interstate trafficking of illegal weapons. Hard as it is to believe, folks, it is illegal to transport tainted milk across state lines. It's a federal felony. That is not true for transporting illegal weapons. And our law enforcement officials in this state and around the country have been begging members of Congress for years to fix this, to allow the FBI to support local law enforcement in efforts. So there's much we need to do on mental health, an area I've worked on for 30 years, but make no mistake, we have problems in this country when we have 30,000 Americans killed every year, a violent death at the end of a gun. And we are a great enough country to support the Second Amendment rights of lawful gun owners and keep our children safe in schools and on the streets and in playgrounds. We can and we should do both. And these three common sense measures, which would pass, certainly background checks would pass if we were allowed a vote in the House of Representatives, which I will keep pushing for every single day because we need this. I don't know how long it will take, but we need to do this to keep our children safe.
Thank you. Mr. Greenberg, your response.
Yeah, I'm an independent kind of guy, and I say right now that Congresswoman Esty and I agree upon this completely. I believe in universal background checks. I believe that we have to make sure that those folks who have mental issues should not possess a gun. We have to make sure that they don't possess a gun through straw techniques. So we're in complete and total agreement on this. If you need to sign a will of sound mind and body, you should possess a gun of sound mind and body. Part of the problem in this state and elsewhere is that we don't have enough facilities to deal with people who have mental health issues. We closed Fairfield, and the system we have for dealing with mental health issues is overburdened. I spoke to an administrator at Danbury Hospital about a month and a half ago, and she said to me she can't handle, their hospital can't handle the number of mental health cases that come into the hospital. And she was begging for us to do something about that, to expand the system that will deal with mental health issues. But on this issue, I believe in universal health checks for guns as well. And we should make sure that we keep the guns out of the bad guys' hands.
Thank you.
If I may?
Sure.
This must come as a surprise, the statement that Mark Greenberg just made. To the NRA, which has given him an A rating. I'll tell you, no member of Congress who supports universal background checks gets an A rating. And the Connecticut Citizens Defense League, folks who are here today, this might be a surprise to you that Mark Greenberg now supports universal background checks. It's the first I've heard of it. And I'm glad to welcome your support on that, because I think that's a great thing. But I do wonder if you've been sought and received the support of the NRA, an A rating, which is tough to get these days, and a group of strong Second Amendment rights supporters in this room who have opposed all such efforts, every single effort in this state and around the country since the tragedy at Newtown. So I am surprised by that answer, but pleased to welcome you to those who understand that we can protect the Second Amendment and to protect children.
Mr. Greenberg.
And it's not just universal background checks, there are other things we need to do as well.
Sorry about that. Do you wish to say anything to that?
I wish that Congresswoman Esty had asked me my opinion about it, because I had never said that I was against it. And as a matter of fact, I was as shocked as everybody was to get the A rating from the NRA, since I didn't seek it. I didn't even fill out their questionnaire. So maybe I'm going to be downgraded to an F after tonight. I don't really know. I said that I was independent, and I am independent. This is the way I feel.
Well, thank you very much. Okay, Ms. Leaf, next question should go first to Mr. Greenberg.
Behind every politician, there's also a person and a story. And I would like to know if you could please share a defining moment in your life that shaped your view of the world and your moral values that you're going to use to guide you if elected to make decisions for our state, and if re-elected to do the same.
Yeah, the hero in my life, which is I think what you're asking, the person who shaped my life, is right here, and that's my dad. He's sitting right there. And let me tell you, this gentleman did more to shape my morals, to shape my beliefs about this country than anybody else, including Ronald Reagan. My dad took care of my mother, who was in a wheelchair for the last 25 years of her life, stricken by multiple sclerosis. Took care of her every day of that 25 years, doing all the private things, picking her up, putting her in the car, putting her in bed, putting the pillow behind her head. And I'm absolutely amazed by the strength of this man and what he did for my mother for 25 years of her life. So he's sitting right here, and I would like him to stand up. Stand up, Dad.
Okay, Ms. Esty.
Well, if we're talking heroes, it might be a close call between my mother and my grandmother, but I think it would have to be my grandmother, who was a feisty woman, I have to say. And one of her favorite expressions was, "To waste your talents is a sin." That's pretty hard stuff. She came from a tough background, an immigrant background, and she worked during the Depression. My grandfather lost his job at a bank when my mother was born, and they didn't have a job for 2 years, and finally my grandmother went to work to try to put food on the table. This is back before any of the programs to help anybody. lived in an unheated cabin north of Chicago. My grandfather took a produce truck into Chicago every day to try to pound the pavement and look for work. And my grandmother fought and struggled, got a job, typed, did whatever it took, and became a member of a board of education, and actually was so inspired by, but also concerned by, this country's inability to ensure equal opportunity for all Americans, that in the 1940s, she became a lobbyist for the Presbyterian Church on civil rights. She took the train from Chicago to Washington to lobby so that every child in this country would have a great education, and she's my hero. She's my hero, and she proved what somebody who works hard and believes in the highest ideals of this country can do.
Well, isn't that heartwarming, really? Thank you both for sharing. Mr. Reiser, would you have a question for, let's see, it's Miss Esty this time first.
Yes, please. Is the body of evidence on Obamacare in Connecticut abundant enough to say, categorically that this is a program that is working and is worth supporting 100%, or is the evidence that quite the opposite, that it has to be repealed?
Ms. Esty, yeah, you're first.
Quick answer. Yes, it is worth supporting. It has cut our uninsured rate in half, but it is not perfect. No big law ever is, and it's my job as a member of Congress to make sure that things work well. And that's why I have voted for and will continue to vote for and seek out ways that it can be improved. And I did that around grandfathered plans. I did that around a number of specific initiatives. And it's not my job to be a cheerleader for a political party or the president or any law, but to make sure that things work and that they work here and they work well in Connecticut. Connecticut's been a leader in the country. Again, not perfect, but things are going pretty well, and we're seeing impact of it. And I will tell you, we're seeing impact of it in the people who now can get affordable health insurance because they had a pre-existing condition. And that was true for Susie Clayton in Canaan, Connecticut. She's saving $1,500 a month because she's a 2-time breast cancer survivor. It was virtually out of reach for her. Everyone in the audience who's got a child between 18 and 26 is benefiting because your kids are covered by health insurance now. So it's not perfect. It shouldn't be repealed, though. Repeal is the wrong answer. Fix it. That's about most things. Fix it, and that's what I'm working to do.
Okay, Mr. Greenberg, your feelings.
Well, I've called for repeal and replace. I don't call for repeal without replace. I call for repeal and replace. Look, I've said that 2,600 pages and 20,000 pages of statutes and code that go with it are way too long. I've said that any book which is greater and longer than the Holy Bible or Ayn Rand's Fountainhead is too big for the federal government and is fraught with issues and disasters. And I think Obamacare has those issues and disasters. Now, as a practical matter, we're not going to repeal it for 2 years. Doesn't matter. Whether we take the Senate, we have the House, we're not going to repeal it. So we have to do some things to try to fix it, I guess, in the next 2 years. We have to have catastrophic insurance sold across state lines. Right now, the states dictate which insurance products are sold. You can get a catastrophic policy in Connecticut. You can't get it in New York. Obamacare has created tiers of subsidies, you might say, where the income levels are at certain tiers, and your subsidy would be based upon that tier. So you could artificially manipulate whether you get a greater subsidy by making an extra $1 or so. By the way, with Obamacare now, if I decided myself and my business to have an adjusted gross income of 0 or negative, I would be entitled to Obamacare, which is absurd. So Obamacare has a lot of mistakes, problems, and issues. Companies are trying to figure out a way to navigate around the mandate by having only 49 full-time workers as opposed to 50. So I find, being in business 39 years, that companies find ways to manipulate around laws, you might say. And I don't think that this is good. I don't think the health delivery system is going to get any better by Obamacare. And frankly, I think that we deal too much with premium as opposed to access to proper medical care. We have to make sure that we maintain the best medical care in the world. So let's not forget about medical care and focus only on premium or subsidizing some people who can't afford it. Let's make sure job one is access to the best medical care in the world.
Mr. Reiser, did you have a follow-up on
Yes,
that?
yes, please, just real
Both
quickly.
candidates, yes.
Real quickly, Mark, is your insurance situation better now than it was before Obamacare?
Well, you know, it's funny that you'd ask that because I'll give you a real-life example. I was forced to go from my group plan to an individual plan with Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield. My insurance premium for a family, and I have a large family, I have seven people in the family, 5 kids, was $2,300 per month with a very small deductible at the time. I was forced to go into an insurance product where the insurance premium is $1,650 per month, but the total of the copays and the deductibles are $6,000 a year. So you could do quick math and determine that from a cost standpoint, it's actually costing us more. The coverage is essentially the same, but it's actually costing us more because of compliance with Obamacare products.
Ms. Esty, would you have a comment on that, or was it just too personal a question?
No, I don't participate in the government-subsidized health care. I get it through my spouse, and it is largely the same at Yale as it was before.
Okay, I would like to take another question that comes from the voters, and then we'll go back to our panel, if I may. This one is slightly long, and it goes to Mr. Greenberg first. Given the fact that income inequality has deepened in our country since 2008, would you support increasing the maximum taxable earnings for Social Security from $117,000 to capture more resources for Social Security Trust Fund from more affluent Americans?
No. I mean, look, increasing the ceiling from what is presently higher is just a tax increase on people who are already paying too much taxes. I have been very vocal, very determined, and now I'll make clear to this audience and elsewhere that I am in favor of increasing the retirement age from 67 to 70. I've said that before. I don't hide from that position. When Social Security was created, the average lifespan for a man was 65. The exact age that you would be collecting Social Security. Essentially, it was a plan for the widow. Now, we live a lot longer. We're productive a lot longer. We work a lot longer. Why is it wrong to raise the retirement age from 67 to 70 and ask younger people only, to work a little bit longer to ensure that they have a system when they retire, to ensure that the system will remain solvent? You could go right now on the Social Security website, and they'll tell you on page 1 that in approximately 15 years, there will only be 73% of the money necessary in order to pay benefits. Well, that basically is saying that the system will be insolvent. I've called for this debate. I want to have a discussion about how we save Social Security, not only for those people who are 52 or older, for which there will be no change of benefits, but also for the younger people who I think will contribute a few extra weeks a year to make sure that the system works for them and for their children. Let's have a debate about it. Let's not hide. Let's not put our heads in the sand. Let's not kick it down the road. Let's talk about it. Let's get in a room. But unfortunately, professional politicians who care most about their own jobs and most about their own re-election are thinking about their re-election next and trying to avoid a hard discussion about the issue. I'm willing to have that hard discussion on the issue. I'm willing to take a vote on that and votes on other issues which might ensure that I do not get reelected. I'm willing to do the right thing for the future of America and to make sure that Social Security is there for young Americans for the future.
Thank you. Ms. Esty.
I think it's worth looking at raising the cap. And I am not a supporter of the proposal to increase the retirement age. And I'll tell you why. It's easy if you're a professional and you're very wealthy like Mark Greenberg to keep working for a long time. It's easy if you make your living doing mental work. But if you are a physical laborer, if you work in a nursing home making minimum wage, it's just not reasonable to think you're going to be able to do your job. Somebody who works on your construction sites, I'll bet you probably don't have 69-year-olds driving backhoes and hammering nails into 2x4s. So we have to be realistic. Many people are living longer, but not everybody is able to work longer. And we need a fair system. We need a system that recognizes the dignity of work for all Americans. And frankly, 51-year-olds, a lot of 51-year-olds I know feel like they're pretty close to retirement age. And if you change the goalposts on them now and tell them they're going to have to work a couple of years longer before they can collect Social Security, they're not worth $100, $200 million. They won't be able to figure out how to make up that difference. So again, I think we should be looking at the proposals that would increase the cap, which would extend the lifespan of the Social Security Trust Fund for 75 years. That's some of the proposals. I think that ought to be top of the list of what we look at, rather than changing the goalposts on folks. And it's differentially going to hit those who have had the hardest luck in this life.
Mr. Greenberg, any comment on that?
Well, yes, I'm against the tax increase, and raising the rate again, the level would be a tax increase. People in this state are tired of taxes being so high. People in this state are tired about this being the most expensive state nearly to live in. People in this state are tired, the older people are tired to being forced to move to North Carolina, South Carolina, or Florida because they simply can't afford to be in this state. People are tired of having their children not come back to their home. So I'm dead set against an increase in the level of taxation. Partial or getting benefits at a younger age than the full retirement age is still possible. Right now, you can get partial retirement at a younger age. We keep that in place. I think we have to have a debate about it. I'm happy to have that debate. I'm happy to sit down and even think about compromise if it meant preserving this system for the future and for the young people. Now, a lot of young people right now, and I speak to them all the time, don't even think that Social Security is going to be around for them. So they start planning on their own retirement. They start putting money away on their own because they have no confidence whatsoever that folks in Congress right now are going to get this done.
All right, anything more, or shall we move on? All right, let's go back to our panel. Ms. Morrow, you're next, and the question is for Ms. Esty.
What is the biggest hurdle to economic recovery in this district, and how will you tackle it?
I think we need to be making a major investment in two things. One is education, and the other is transportation and infrastructure. I think those are the two keys for our district. Those are our strengths, and those would unleash the power of what we need to do. And that really is focused around American manufacturing. I think that really is our strength, as well as biotech and biomed. That's why I have been focusing on science, technology, engineering, math. That's why I've been focusing on improving our transportation system so it's easier for businesses and people to move themselves around the district. And these are the core issues I hear from people all the time: transportation, education, and jobs. And they can all be linked through American manufacturing, through better efforts on skill sets for all of our children. And those are going to reap the kind of short and long-term benefits. One of the advantages of investing in infrastructure, and Larry Summers just wrote a piece in, I think it was the Financial Times in the last couple of days, again, emphasizing the greatest multiplier effect you get from investing is to invest in infrastructure. It creates jobs right now, and it creates a pathway to a better functioning economy in the future. That's why it's so important we do it. And it's unfortunate that it's been seen as a jobs-only short-term project, because it's really not. It's about building on the strength of this country.
Mr. Greenberg, your views.
Yes, as I said before, we went from first to worst in 24 years or so, and it's going to take us some years to get back. It's not an overnight fix. Unfortunately, we have very, very bad policies in Hartford that would be driving this economic engine or trying to drive the economic engine. It's always been said that this state is not friendly to business. I think we have to ensure that our small businesses become the engine of growth. The ad mills of the world, as I described before, the factory in New Britain that got that great contract and wants to hire more people. We have a skill there. Let's deal with education at vocational level to get some of these young people to realize that these are good jobs. They're not factories the way we used to think about them. They're manufacturing plants, and this is where our skill set is. So we have to start this road back to prosperity. We've gotten in a very bad way since 2008 in this district and the state in general. We've been in a recession, depression, and we're struggling to get out of it. So we have to try to energize the small companies to get back on track and to hire people. Now, to give you another example, for instance, of how in this district, and specifically Litchfield, Connecticut, in a property that I own, it's taken 3 years to convert a 65,000 square foot shopping center to a 62,000 square foot shopping center with a brand new Stop and Shop in it. 3 years. And in that 3 years, the town of Litchfield has lost $180,000 in taxes, and young people and other people have not been able to work in the increase in jobs that brand new Stop and Shop would then allow. And this is because of wetlands regulations. This is because of other regulations. This is because the court system has allowed a few people to stall this process. So we have to try to streamline the laws in the court system in this state to allow for proper development and quicker development to allow us to be able to have more jobs and to grow again.
Is there another comment on?
Yes, if I may. I'm going to have to say something here. I thought this was a debate for the 5th Congressional District. It's kind of sounding like a governor's debate. You know, I'm hearing about taxes in the state and how bad we are in the state, about Common Core, about regulations, inland wetlands, about the state court system. But what we're talking about here, Mark, is not that. It's about what the future is of the voice for the people in the 5th District of Connecticut in Washington to be their representative on national issues and on national laws. And I welcome you. Seems like there's room for more people in that gubernatorial debate going on, and I would urge you to do that if you think you can do a better job here in Connecticut with the laws in Connecticut, with the tax climate, with the education system. But what we're talking about is the national issues and the national policies. So again, I think it's important to remember that you're not running against Dan Malloy. You're running against me.
Okay. Mr. Greenberg, do you wish to add anything to this? Okay.
Well,
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. It's almost time for applause. Any comment?
I'm trying to be responsive to the question that was asked to me. You know, I can't solve all the issues that your Democratic administration and Congress and Harry Reid, who's holding 435 bills on his desk, you know, so I'm trying to solve.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Leith, next question, and it goes to Mr. Greenberg.
I'm going to take the lead of Jill on the questions about the economy, but take a perspective that I think it reflects what's going on in the 5th District. Recently, there's been a group of non-for-profits and female leaders that are going to look into what they can do to help struggling middle-class families in our area. There's been a big shift in the past 3 years to the local area non-for-profits. When they look at the profiles of the families that they're helping, the income is not decreasing, it's actually going up, but they're seeing that the cost of living in Connecticut is so high that a family that before found themselves describing as middle class are actually finding themselves to actually be closer now to the poverty line than before. So on a national level, what kind of policies will you support, have you supported to help struggling middle class working families in our state, in our area?
Okay, Mr. Greenberg.
Well, yeah, you know, what we need most in this state and the country, Congresswoman, is jobs. Jobs, jobs, jobs. We have to get people working again. We have a lot of people who are out of work, 700,000 people who have given up looking for jobs, 7 million people who are unemployed, A 5.9% unemployment rate is too high still, in my opinion. We have to change the tax code. We have to decrease marginal rates. We have to get rid of a lot of loopholes. We have to bring more people into the system, engage more people. We have to make it easier for folks to find jobs, earn a living, and do things on their own, frankly. That relates to the state and the federal government as well. So we have to deal with that. In 2008, we had a terrible recession, depression. We still have it in this state. We haven't crawled out of that. There are other states that have. North Dakota, South Dakota, Eastern Pennsylvania, other states have done very, very well. We haven't. We haven't. We're actually losing population in this state. We're losing population because 49% of the people want to leave. If these people didn't have mortgages in excess of the value of their house, they could sell their house and actually leave. If these people didn't have fathers or mothers who were perhaps sick that they couldn't leave, they would leave. If these people were not stuck by bricks and mortar in their business to this state, they would leave. To me, that's a terrible indictment on this state. I would love this state to be great again. I came to this state because I believe this state was great again. We have the best weather, 4 beautiful seasons. We're between Boston and New York, but something has gone wrong in this state. We have to fix this state. We have to do it by fixing the economy of the United States. We have to do it also at the local level by having different leadership at the local level and in Hartford.
Okay, Ms. Esty?
Well, as to the question of what federal proposals and efforts I'd undertake to address that very real question, I mean, the truth is the American worker is more productive than he and she has ever been. But for the last 10 years, most families have seen their wages basically flat. People are working harder than ever and not feeling better, not doing better. So there are a number of specific things that I'm supportive of that I think will help address that. One is to raise the federal minimum wage. Now, one of the reasons we need to do that is because, you know, we're a high-cost state. We are, and the coastal states are. And we've done the right thing in our state to raise our minimum wage because no one, I don't think, should be working full-time and raising their family in poverty. People who are working full-time don't want to have to get nutrition support. They want to be able to pay all their bills, but if we don't pay people enough to do that, we aren't honoring our commitment as Americans to make work pay. And we need to get back to that fundamental principle that people should have work pay for the work that they do. I'm a supporter of the pay equity bills. Too many women are still paid less than their male counterparts. This needs to be changed. We need to deal with housing. It is a big issue. I know from, particularly in Danbury, it's a big issue because I've talked with folks in Danbury, business owners, people now living in Waterbury and community to Danbury. We have housing affordability issues we need to work on. And all of these things are important. And I was actually a little curious that Mark said that the answer to this was actually lowering income tax at the higher end and increasing it. I mean, that's bringing more people in the system, is raising it on middle-class folks, that's the answer to how we get to more job growth. I disagree. I don't think that's right. I don't think that's right. I do think we need comprehensive tax reform, make no mistake about it. But I don't think that should be done on the backs of middle-class families who are trying to figure out how to pay their bills, how to pay for tuition for their kids in school, and how to take care of grandma or grandpa who might be in a nursing home. I don't think that's the right values.
Mr. Greenberg, do you wish to say anything to that?
Yes.
Okay.
Congresswoman Esty and I do agree that we should have equal pay for women for equal jobs. As a matter of fact, in a way, I would always believe that women in some of my businesses have done better jobs than men. Sorry, guys. It's just the way it is. Cynthia, for instance, in my office in New York, she's been working for me for 35 years. She's my controller. Betty's been in charge of the secretarial staff 32 years. And Lisa is running the Simon Foundation, which my wife Linda and I created, where we save dogs and cats, in Bloomfield, Connecticut. And you might have heard my barking commercial. It was filmed there. So I believe in equal pay for women. I really do. It's only right.
All right. Well, we've come to the end. Sorry, Mr. Reiser, you won't get to ask your question. It is now time for closing statements. Timers, if you would reset your watches. By prearrangement, Mr. Greenberg, you go first, and you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you very
And
much.
the timers will indicate when you have 30 seconds left, and then a red card for stop.
Okay, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
I would like to thank again everybody here for coming and being such a good audience. This is a critical election, in my opinion. I've been running for 5 years. This is my 3rd time running. I'd like to say that when I first ran in 2010, I had 3 children. When I ran in 2012, I had 4. 2014, I have 5. And my wife, Linda, whom I want to thank, by the way, for putting up with me for these 5 years, said to me, Mark, you better win this time. So I promised her that if I didn't win, that I'm not running again, and I made that very public. There's nothing more important for me to do than run for the greatness of this country, to run for my 5 children and for their friends. I'm in a position, lucky enough to be in the position, to be a product of the American dream, and I make no mistake about that. I make no apologies for that. But I worked hard. And along the way, I had my failures. So I'm successful now, but I had failures on the way. If I do nothing to make this country great again, then I'm part of the problem and not part of the solution. And in my life, my father and mother have taught me, be part of the solution, do something, become engaged. And that's why I'm here, struggling to make this country great again. I'm in it to make this country great again. I'm in it for the American exceptionalism that we talked about 100 years ago. This is a country under God better than any that's ever existed. And our founders knew how to put together a constitution indicating our greatness, showing our greatness. They knew about the other systems that didn't work. I'm in it to fight for you, not for me. I'm in it for all the right reasons, and I ask you for your vote.
Thank you very much. Ms. Esty, let's hold the applause till both candidates have spoken, then please go for it afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you. As a 3rd-generation League member, a special thank you to the League of Women Voters, to our panelists, to the News Times, but most importantly, to you, to the great Americans who are here who understand that the greatest threat to our democracy is not vigorous disagreement. We've seen some of that tonight. The greatest threat is disengagement. So I want to thank you for your engagement, for your commitment to the sometimes hard and difficult work of struggling through, of working with each other, of arguing, of trying to find common ground, because that is what American democracy is all about. I've told you I got started doing this because my daughter sort of called me to account to be responsible, to be a problem solver in my own community. And I take that practical problem solving to Washington, mindful that decisions that I make there are going to affect state officials, are going to affect local officials, are going to affect the teachers in our schools, the nonprofits in our communities, the business community. And that kind of accountability is absolutely necessary to do this job well. I'm running proudly on my record because I found that despite how broken it is in Washington, there are people of goodwill on both sides of the aisle, and I've been finding those people, and that's why I've been able to get a bill passed on clean energy, why I've been able to get a bill with the Texan Republican Lamar Smith on STEM education, because I can assure you there are good people all over the country who are trying to do the right thing. I'm proud to represent you. We've got a lot of good work to do. Proud to be able to have helped Tom Campbell, who's here in the crowd, and veterans all across this district. That's an important part of the job as well. So I want to thank you for your engagement, for your involvement. I thank you for the honor of representing you for the last 2 years, and I ask for your support and your vote on November 4th. Thank you very much.
And now for that round of applause. Before you all leave, let me remind you, November 4th is Election Day. Let me remind you, there is a ballot question, a constitutional amendment. We've left some information about it for you. Do exercise your right to vote, and thank you all.